Okay, everybody. If you are raising a child or caring for a child in your clinic with an autism spectrum disorder, this is an important video because in this video, I talk about 10 things that I'm calling commandments. And as you can guess, there's lots of variability, lots of opinions. But the other day in my clinic, one of my parents asked me this question after we had concluded our time together in regards to diagnosis. The father looks at me and says, "Are there things that you should do and things that you should not do in relation to an autism spectrum disorder?" And I told him absolutely the answer is yes. In this video, we are talking about what I told him that day. Let's get to work. First things first. If you're raising a child with an autism spectrum disorder, or if you're caring for a child with an autism spectrum disorder in your clinic, I want them to go to school. Now, listen, schools vary, states vary, laws vary. I understand that things can be variable depending on where you're watching this and what part of the world that you're watching it from. But please understand that it's certainly in the United States, I almost always advocate that a child go to school. Now, why would I need to say this? Why would I need to say this to families? Because families are scared. They struggle. They're stressed. They say, well, Johnny doesn't talk, or Susie is unable to, effectively communicate in a way that anybody other than me can understand. And believe me, I get that. I've got kids of my own. I've certainly seen kids go through this process in the clinic for 20 years, but I still advocate that a child goes to public school. Now, maybe you go to school and it's not a good fit. Maybe your child goes to school and it's not what you'd hoped it would be, and you transition away. Maybe you go to a dual enrollment option. Maybe you go to a homeschooling option. Irregardless of where you land, it's where you start that I want to try and encourage you. Going to public school allows your child to get access to IEP supports, individualized education programs. You're paying for these programs through your tax dollars. And your child, along with you and the school, work together to come up with a system of interventions to help optimize the child's academic environment. And those are services that, as I've said, you're paying for with your tax dollars. I want you to get the opportunity to see what those services can look like for your child in the school system before you decide whether or not those services are a good fit for your child. You need to try on the shoe before you decide if it's going to be a good fit. Now, an IEP or IEP supports can start as early as preschool. So I want your child to go to school at age 3. I want them to start their evaluations prior to that. I want them to get into a public school system and see how it works. As they go into preschool at age 3, it doesn't matter for the most part if you qualify for an IEP. If your child is potty trained, it doesn't matter if they're able to effectively communicate at that point in time, because those are skills that they will learn over time, and they should not, the absence of those skills should not preclude your child from transitioning successfully to a public school system. Number one commandment: go to school. Number two, don't over therapize your child. What on earth do I mean? Look, I'm not trying to be offensive, but so many times I've seen families who spend the vast majority of their waking hours, okay, either at work or in a waiting room while their child is being checked into and receiving, no doubt, excellent therapies and services. Without question, wonderful therapies and services from a speech or an OT or physical therapist or an ABA provider or a talk therapist or whatever it is for you. And while those therapies and services are no doubt valuable and beneficial, there comes a point in time when we have to ask ourselves, is the juice worth the squeeze? Am I getting out of this what I'm putting into it? And there's times when the answer is going to be yes, and there's times when the answer is going to be no. But what I want you to understand is that you have to ask the question. I very much desire for families to spend time as a family doing family things. I want them to go and play in muddy water with overalls. I wanted you to go on bike rides. I want you to experience things. Maybe it's an abject disaster. Maybe you'd never do it again, but at least you're doing it. I don't want every waking moment of between you and your child to be nothing nothing more than a therapeutic intervention. I want you to laugh. I want to watch movies. I want you to just exist and breathe and experience and enjoy each other without having to feel like every waking minute of every day we need to work on functional communication training or transitions or whatever the skill set is before you don't I want you to get the therapies. I want your child to experience the very best that your community has to offer, but don't over therapize them. Enjoy them. Number 3, do advocate and plan for independence. Here's what I mean by this. When families ask me, Dr. Noble, can you tell me, are you able to say with any degree of certainty how my child will do in the future? And I always say the same thing. I always say, absolutely, I can. 100% I can. Am I accurate? Is it perfect? Does it always turn out the way that I prognosticate? No, it does not. But I always answer the question the same way. I said, listen, I believe that over time, with therapies and interventions in moderation, okay, in experience through school and in peers and in modeling and all the great things you're going to be doing for your child, I believe over time they will learn to effectively communicate. I believe they'll be able to learn how to meet many of their own needs, get themselves dressed, transition effectively. I believe that they will be a blessing to the community and they will be blessed by the community. I believe that you should plan for the highest level of independence for your child as possible. The reason I say it that way is because no other future is worth shooting for. It doesn't always work that way. It's not always perfect. They know I don't have a crystal ball, but you know what I do have? A ton of optimism and hope. And you know, over 20 years of doing developmental pediatrics, clinical genetics, how many times people have come back to my clinic asking for a refund on hope? 0 times. 0 times. I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to be wrong big in an optimistic and hope-filled way. And I want families to reflect the same mentality. Plan for independence. Don't fall into the trap of doing for your child the things that they can learn to do for themselves. Yes, someday they can learn how to get dressed. So let's take steps towards that. Yes, someday they may need help utilizing utensil on their own. So what can we do today to slowly take steps towards that future reality? If you get to a spot where that doesn't appear to be the reality, that stream of independence doesn't appear to be the thing that your child is going to actualize in their life, at that moment we will pivot, but not before that moment. Not before that moment. Not before we've squeezed out every level of optimism and hope and skill set from your child. Only then will we pivot and move in a different direction and change the level of independence that we're shooting for, but not before. Plan for independence. Number 3, don't compare. Don't compare. Autism, as an example, along with a host of other neurodevelopmental disorders, comes with a variation in skill sets. And it's very tempting, once you've spoken with somebody like me and you've received the diagnosis, to go onto the internet and to go into the back rooms and the underbelly of Facebook and get involved in a group chat about that describes individuals that your child appears to have nothing in common with. Maybe your child has a higher level of skill. Maybe your child has a lower level of skill. But it doesn't matter, because if you're trapped in an environment, whether in your own mind or in a Facebook group or in a therapy group in your community, and all you're doing is finding yourself comparing your child in a multitude of ways to other children, you have to understand that their story is not your story. The way they respond to a certain therapeutic intervention may not be how your child responds. But in general, comparing your journey to someone else's is a really, really frustrating way to go through this. I heard someone say once that you should never compare your beginning to somebody else's middle, right? Maybe these families have been at therapies longer. Maybe their child comes in with a different skill set and they're going to respond a little bit more quickly to some of the therapeutic interventions. But please, as a family, don't fall into the trap of comparing your outcomes, your progress, and your child with other people's. Just because they have a similar diagnostic nomenclature does not mean that what comes after it is in any way, shape, or form similar. Perspectives. Let's talk about perspectives. Do As you go through the journey of caring for a child with autism, do embrace, respect, and seek to understand other people's perspective. Okay, so if you're new to this, if you're new to the field of autism or new to the diagnosis within your family, or if you're a seasoned, it's possible already in this video I've offended you by the way I talk or the way I choose to describe individuals who have an autism spectrum disorder. Maybe you're wanting me to say it a different way. There are individuals who very much identify as diagnosis first or people first language. So individuals that want us to use autistic as a description. There are others that want us to use an autism spectrum disorder, which is also a very viable way to describe and discuss. But what I want you to understand is that it's not bad and it's not wrong, and there is no specific consensus on how we talk about these difficulties. Embrace and seek to understand the perspectives of other people, whether or not they have a difference of perspective as it relates to a applied behavior analysis or the use of vitamins or the use of hyperbaric oxygen or whatever it is. Have an open mind, seek to understand, and then really partner with your primary providers, partner with an individual that's on your care team that's helping you think through these things in order to determine what's the next best steps for you. But please don't fall into the trap of thinking that someone is all bad or all good because they use the words in the same way that you do. Seek to understand and embrace other perspectives as you go through this journey. Next, I'm getting a bunch of them. Next, don't neglect self-care. Listen, I'm going to say this, okay, and I don't want you to get mad at me. Your child, in general, is really only going to do as good as you do. Okay, there's a ceiling in regards to the progress that they're able to make on a day-to-day basis, and oftentimes that ceiling is the emotional bandwidth that you have to participate in the therapies, as I've said, within reason, but also to embrace the child and to accept them and to help them grow and invite them into a loving relationship. If you are completely wiped out, right? If you're on the ground with no shoes on and you're walled on the ground like this guy and you're just gassed because you don't sleep because all you do is worry, okay? Or you maybe seek out different substances to kind of quell or calm the storm of your life. And you're doing that over and over and over again, and you're burning the candle on both ends. Now you're in therapies, now you're in services, now you're on Facebook feeling bad about yourself. You're not exercising, you're not connecting with your spouse, you're not finding people in the community to kind of walk this path with you. What I want you to understand is, even though it feels like you're advocating for your child by dying on the sword of martyrdom so that you can help them get to the next best place in your life. What I want you to understand is that's a mistake. It's a mistake because you're draining your emotional bank account when you need to be able to make withdrawals in the future. So don't sacrifice your self-care just so that you can get what you need, get your kid where they need to go. You need to find that balance. Next up, this is a do seek supports. And let me explain what I mean. As you're new in this, if you've received a diagnosis, I think it's never a bad idea to meet with somebody once. Let's say you don't want to meet with somebody like me. I'm a developmental geneticist and I'm a developmental pediatrician and clinical geneticist. Maybe I'm not the right guy for you. Maybe you don't want to hear about, evidence-based best practice, or maybe you disagree with it. And I respect that. But please don't understand that somebody like me is going to shut you down. I absolutely want to partner with you on your journey. And there's things that I'll prescribe because I believe in them, and things that I advocate for your family because I can prove that they're effective. And there are other things that I might listen to you and I might give you my thoughts, but my job is not to dissuade you from anything unless of course it's dangerous. So please, when you go through this journey, listen to what people have to say. Go and find an expert in your community. Ask your provider to make a referral so you can meet with somebody who does this on a day-to-day basis, who can probably finish your sentences and help you coordinate care and collaborate with other members of the professional community to ensure that your child gets the opportunity to see what's out there. So please don't close off certain groups or certain therapeutic interventions, whether it's OT, PT, speech, or a developmental pediatrician, or your primary care provider, or an ABA provider. I think it's worth your time, energy, and resources to at least listen to what these people have to say, because really, you may not agree, but we're all trying to help you. Next up, don't bubble wrap them. Don't bubble wrap a child. So listen, I want families to do therapies and services within reason. I want them to go to school. I want them to do all of these things. I do. But I also want them to learn how to fish and spend as much time fishing or pulling a fish hook out of a shoe as I do you waiting in a waiting room, for the next therapeutic intervention. Now, they're both important and they're both true, but so many times I see families that it's almost like they just can't help themselves. They want to bubble wrap their kids. They'll fill in the blank. I'll say things like, well, what about school? And they'll say, well, but you don't understand because and then they fill in the blank with all these things that their child can't do or that schools can't do. And I'm not debating that those may be true, but I also believe that you need to give the school and the birthday party and the soccer coach and your family the opportunity to be blessed by your child, because your child's pretty awesome. They're pretty awesome. So give them the opportunity to be blessed by the community, but give the community the opportunity to be blessed by your child. Yeah, you're probably right most of the time, and you can read the air, and you know that maybe going to Applebee's on a Thursday night or two for Tuesday is not probably a great decision. Maybe a monster truck rally is not a great decision for your family. Okay, 100%, you're probably right. But please, please, please don't spend your time deciding what your child can't do based off their skills, right? Think about it more like, who can they bless by their presence? Don't spend your waking hours bubble wrapping a child. Go to a trampoline jump house. Go to a petting zoo. Just try it out. If it's a disaster, it's a disaster. If it's a Control-Alt-Delete moment, fine. But at least you tried. Don't bubble wrap these kids. Consistency and structure. I don't need to tell any of you this. Consistency and structure is key. If you know this is not a skill for you, there are a number of great resources on the internet to help you put together picture schedules for your day. There are a number of ways to make a visual schedule for your child so they can see what happens now, what happens next, mixing in those high preference activities. If you're like me and you don't wake up in a disciplined manner, knowing how to put one foot in front of the other most days, listen, that's okay. That's okay. But there are people who can help you, but you need consistency and structure. Not knowing how the day is going to go and not planning ahead is only going to provide an unneeded amount of stress for your child and your family. And lastly, I think this is my last one. Don't forget their name. Don't forget their name. What a silly thing. What a silly thing for me to say. Why would I tell you not to forget their name? Because listen, I was trained and I will continue to be a people first guy. Okay. And what I want you to understand is that before your child received a diagnosis of autism, before you brought them to the clinic, before they saw the psychologist or the developmental pediatrician or whoever it was who did the testing to kind of put the pieces together so we can devise a treatment plan, before the diagnosis of autism, your child had a name. Your child had a name and you gave them that name, and it's a great name. It's a perfect name. It's a wonderful name. And so often what happens is a child receives a diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder, and then families, being well-meaning families, you're well-meaning, you're fantastic, you're doing the best you can, and you're out in the community and you don't realize it, but it's a very subtle slip into starting every conversation by saying, well, listen, I hope this goes okay, but he has autism. He has autism. So I need to explain the diagnosis to you before I tell you the name of my child, what the name means, where I live, what I'm excited about, what he's really good at. I don't want you to believe that you have to start every conversation with a diagnosis. And if you do, if you're in a situation where you feel like every conversation has to start with a description or or to devise some kind of understanding or explanation about your child's strengths and weaknesses or their DSM criteria or whatever it is, if you are in a situation where you are feeling like that is what people around you need, do yourself a favor and find a new group of people to be around. Okay? You don't have to do it. You don't have to. Now, are there times and places? Yes. Yes, of course. I have one of my children has a neurodevelopmental disorder. And believe me, I've been in this place where I never wanted to tell anybody about his diagnosis or his description because I didn't feel it was necessary. I didn't feel it was fair to him. And I thought that people should just understand. And you're watching this, you know for a fact there's some people out there who do not understand. You're on the subway, you're on the airplane, you're in the line, and your child's maybe struggling for a minute, and people can't read the air. They're not like you. They're not adept at getting the sense that there's something else happening here, that's not just a child having a meltdown at Costco, but maybe it's the bright lights or the loud sounds or the textures or the whatever. There's a lot of people who just don't get it. And there are times when you do have to educate. I understand, but please, please make that the exception and not the rule. I tell families all the time, listen, your child has a name. Use the name. And if you need a diagnosis to help explain to people what's going on, then you're probably around the wrong group of people. Let me close with this. Listen, thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to put out a lot more live videos because I think people need to know what we talk about in the developmental clinic. These clinics are very rare. People wait a very long time. And these are very common questions that come up. And I just gave you the 10 autism commandments that I explained to a family the other day because they asked a very smart question. Are there do's and don'ts as it relates to autism? And I hope after watching this video that you would understand that there are some do's and don'ts. You may not agree with them, but again, it's not about agreeing. It's just about navigating the system together and embracing the perspectives of each other. If you want to go further faster, come to our website, join our newsletter. We will put out stuff every week. We'll show you about new videos. We'll answer common questions. We're here to provide value. And I thank you so much for watching. I'm going to see you in the next video.